Welcome to Internet Radio. This is Barry Schrader from DeKalb County Life Online. Today I will be airing my sermon, which was delivered at Sycamore United Methodist Church on January 16th and 17th during Human Relations Sunday and to honor Martin Luther King. Good morning. I must admit I'm a little nervous talking into this microphone. I'm afraid some reporter might misquote me, and I'm sure you've had that experience yourselves. Thank you, Pastor Harleen and Pastor Dan, for inviting me to share my story about Martin Luther King, while also being able to talk about bettering human relations and seeking justice for all. This will be the first time for me since Kay and I moved back here to our roots that I've had the opportunity to stand at this lectern and give testimony about Reverend King, and even my college mentor, Reverend Ron Russell from the Wesley Foundation at NIU. Now, going back to my childhood, I must admit it was a very sheltered existence in rural Genoa. Going to school in a small town, we never saw a minority person, black, yellow, or brown. It was even whispered that African American people were not allowed here after sundown. At that time, they all lived in a place called Northtown over in Sycamore. But in my enterprising youth, I sold bait to those coming to fish in the Kishwaukee River nearby. I charged 25 cents a dozen for night crawlers that I'd plucked from our big yard after soaking it thoroughly overnight. Many of my customers were African American people from the Chicago area who loved to come out to the country and fish in the Kishwaukee River. But I had an aunt by a second marriage who had originally been raised in the South, but now lived in the Chicago area where my uncle worked in a factory. She happened to be visiting one time when one of my African American customers came knocking at the door to buy some worms, and my aunt uttered an epithet I had never heard before, saying, "Damned N-word, they are everywhere." Now, my mother must have really blanched at that, but she waited until my aunt and uncle had left before letting me know she had acted crudely, and this was not how you treated people of other colors. She then related how when she began teaching in Greentown School south of Waterman, back in the late 1920s, there were two young black girls in their teens who came to school during the season each year when their father was working on a nearby farm. I have a slide to show you on the wall showing these girls beside my mother in this one-room school back then. My mother told me they were old for their grade level because they spent only a few months in school each year while their father was working in the fields. These girls were sisters, and they were 15 and 16 years old, and they were only in 5th grade. It was unusual in those days to find an African-American family even in rural DeKalb County, and I imagine it was the only contact most kids ever had with people of another color back then, except maybe for some Mexican farm workers who were either attached to the cannery or even the hemp mill over in Rochelle during World War II. But when their sons went off to the Army and off to war, they found out there were a lot of African Americans, Hispanics, Puerto Ricans, Filipinos, and even Navajos that they had never interacted with before. So that is a lesson they brought back home after they'd been serving in the military and fighting side by side. But I should move on into human relations in general. How many of us have opened our homes or shared a meal with a Mexican farm worker, a homeless person, a former prisoner, not related directly to us, a person of a foreign faith like Hindu, Muslim, or even Jewish? I can only claim credit for doing 3 of these things. A homeless man named Big Mike, an undocumented Mexican, a man who cared for our lawn and pool in Livermore, California, and now someone from Evergreen Village right here in Sycamore who happens to be in touch with us every week when she comes to our home to clean our home. And we also have met and talked to her family and talked about their difficult journey to find new housing at an affordable price after they were forced to leave Evergreen Village. Oh, Kay, who's in the congregation today, I forgot about the young Jewish co-ed who introduced us at Northern. Her name was Marilyn Frank. She's now Marilyn Stromborg. A lot of you probably know her. You can learn a lot and be immersed in other people's cultures just by inviting in an international student from NIU or an exchange student at Sycamore High School. We enjoyed the opportunity to do that through potlucks put on by the Network of Nations at NIU and also short-term visits by foreign exchange students through Rotary. I now want to mention a wonderful mentor, nearly as influential as my parents during the times I went to college here at NIU. Because he was not only my minister at the Wesley Foundation, he was even my landlord because for 2 years while I attended Northern, I lived at the Wesley Foundation house at 205 Normal Road, paying for my rent by doing the maintenance, yard work, snow shoveling, and other tasks around the church. His name was Reverend Ron Russell, who not only preached love thy neighbor and peaceful coexistence with other races, but walked the talk by taking a busload of young northern students down south as part of the freedom marches over Easter vacation. I missed that opportunity of being exposed to this freedom march because I had to work during Easter vacation, but I heard so much from the students who came back, and I regretted not having ever taken that time away from work. But with Reverend Ron's encouragement, I did speak out on race relations because I had been reporting on them for the Northern Star and looking into how the community treated the students who are from other countries as well as minorities. I spoke at a Student Education Association rally my senior year detailing these abuses, like rental housing discrimination, mistreatment in businesses by the international students and minority students, and the general apathy to the international students and minority students here in the DeKalb area. But that was way back in the early 60s, so I hope none of that is true today. And I am almost certain, thanks to Pastor Lee, who is here with us today from NIU's Wesley Foundation, that she is working on these very same issues with the students on campus. But some years after college and a newspaper career here, we moved out to California in the Bay Area, only 30 miles south of Berkeley. Now that was an experience that many people have never had. Living near San Francisco, where the Haight-Ashbury district was, and also near the University of California, Berkeley campus. Whenever we took friends or family members visiting us up to University of California, Berkeley, they could see demonstrations firsthand, and then, of course, going to San Francisco to Haight-Ashbury, where we saw the hippies who had taken over a whole neighborhood of the city. This was a real eye-opener for a lot of people who came to visit. But over time, as we remained in the Bay Area for those 33 years, we came across a lot of different people from many cultures, political persuasions, and even lifestyles. For example, gays. My longtime city editor was gay, so I learned a lot from her. In fact, she passed away last year, and we went back to Walnut Creek to have lunch with her partner and reminisce about the good times we all had together. That brings me to the core of my presentation today, meeting Dr. Martin Luther King. My first experience was while at NIU, and we took a Wesley Foundation bus trip into a Southern Christian leadership rally in Soldier Field, where Dr. King and other African American leaders spoke on the conditions in the South, as well as what was happening right there in Chicago. We were in a minority in that gathering, thousands of people. It's around Soldier Field, and you could see the little pockets of white students or white people who had come to this rally, but we certainly were in a minority that day. But we ended the rally by all joining hands and singing an emotionally charged "We Shall Overcome," which left many in tears and embedded in me a desire to work for justice for all. It was sort of like the Billy Graham rally I attended 10 years before with my parents at the same place on Soldier Field. Well, then 6 years later, on a Sunday morning in January 1968, I found myself standing outside the gates of Santa Rita County Jail in the Bay Area, waiting to see Dr. King up close and personal. At the time, I was editor of the local daily paper, the Herald and News, at the tender young age of 28. I found out he was coming there to visit his good friend Joan Baez and her fellow protesters who had been jailed for supporting draft resistors and other opposition to the war in Vietnam. When I got there, I talked to his driver who had remained with the car. However, beside me, there were 200 young Berkeley students, mostly people from the Berkeley area, who were protesting the war and the imprisonment of the draft resistors and people like Joan Baez who had been supporting them. And there are also 4 other news media people, a radio station of Berkeley, Oakland Tribune, and the Pacific News Service were out there with me. I did ask for the aide for a chance to get in a few questions, but he deferred me until Dr. King was finished with the jail visitation. When Dr. King did emerge from the prison gates with 2 of his aides, he immediately saw the crowd of young protesters and was anxious to talk with them. So he got up on the edge of the car door frame, and with a voice that carried all through the crowd, no microphone needed, shared his exchange with Joan Baez, and then launched into an unpopular topic for many, what he called the unjust war in Vietnam, and how he said it fit in with the movement for racial equality. I only got a chance to ask him a couple questions at the end, but I was able to hold my ground up against the car hood, even though I was pressed up against the car by the crowd, trying to hold my camera and setting my old reel-to-reel tape recorder on the hood so I could catch his every word. So my tape that I had made that day, I still have today, made a CD of it, and I can hear every word and remember everything that was said that day. He was without a doubt the most awe-inspiring and charismatic person I have ever met, right up there with Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. My close-up photo that I took of him ran on our front page the next day. Now, fast-forwarding 35 years, I was standing outside the gates of my former employee, Sandia National Laboratory in Livermore, where there were 1,000 people working, part of a silent vigil that we held that day on Martin Luther King's birthday, protesting the decision of the laboratory not to honor Martin Luther King's birthday by giving employees a day off, as most of the nation had done. You can see in the photo I'm accompanied by two Methodist ministers, two other people from a national peace movement called Tri-Valley Cares, and also two other people from the laboratory itself. We held this silent vigil in the morning as 1,000 employees drove by in their cars, and the sign said, "Honk if you remember Martin Luther King," and we had many people that did respond positively. Anyway, they were practicing, our Methodist ministers with me, and the others as well, were practicing what all Christians, what we all believe in, which is justice for all. It reminded me of a Sunday school song, stand up for Jesus. So I want to say something more about what's in the sermon title today: justice for all, standing up for what is right, opposing tyranny and terrorists, and our roles as Christians in promoting justice, whether it be for the poor from Evergreen Village, the homeless, the disabled veterans, the mentally ill, or the refugees from Syria and other countries who are suffering so terribly today. I should tell you about our small Methodist church in Livermore, which sponsored two families of Vietnamese boat people, provided them with rental housing, jobs, English as second language lessons, and a way to shop, and of course, most of all, the freedom to live and be educated in a free society without fear of tyranny and persecution for their beliefs. They happen to both be Catholics. Now, where is the Methodist Church today in providing a safe haven and homes for our brothers and sisters who have been driven from their homes, tortured, and robbed of everything they hold dear? We can certainly do more as a local congregation in Sycamore. We don't have to go blindly into this and be fearful of ISIS terrorists. We can take in homeless refugees who have been cleared for immigrating here by the government. There's already an international community at NIU, and there are Syrians among them. So one or two refugee families would not be left alone here without support from the campus community and people they know. But what about the Lutheran Church, the Catholics, the Baptists, and even Israel God and North Avenue Baptist Church right here in Sycamore, or other churches around DeKalb County? Will they step up in this international crisis and help save lives of people who have been displaced? We could set the example here at this church and challenge them as people of faith to help others less fortunate, not just through local food pantries and other things like Love Inc., but bringing the displaced, the downtrodden from across the ocean to live and share in our good fortunes. I plan to ask the Sycamore Methodist men at their next meeting to take the lead in this, donating money and time myself. I will join with them if they want to by fixing up a vacant farmhouse or other dwelling in the DeKalb Sycamore area and working with UMCOR, that's a United Methodist Relief Organization, to do this now, not wait another year. I realize the church board and our clergy must get behind such a project, but waiting for the bureaucracy to tell us what we can do is just insufferable. So I repeat the theme of this human relations service: foster better race relations, better human relations, and help in our one small way to advocate for justice for all. I leave you with this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, "Use me, God. Show me how to take who I am, who I want to be, and what I can do, and use it for a purpose greater than myself." End of quote. So each one of us, each family, each church congregation can step up and do God's work, helping God's people to live in freedom and not under the oppressive regimes that now control so many millions of people's lives around the globe. It only takes two people, you and me, who can make a difference and change these oppressed people's lives forever. Now let's all say amen. Thank you. Now I want to introduce a young man, Isam Rafia. He is a gentleman originally from Damascus, Syria, who recently came to America with his family and is now housed in DeKalb with his wife and 4-year-old son. In Syria, he was a professor at the University of Damascus and chairman of the music department. I've asked him to come today to play his native instrument, which is called an oud, similar to a lute, and he's now going to give us a selection. Go ahead, Isam. Thank you for listening to this message that I delivered on January 16th and 17th at the Sycamore United Methodist Church. I welcome comments that you might have about this subject or about the service. My email address is barry815@sbcglobal.net. That is BARRY815@sbcglobal.net. Now, until next time, this is Barry Schrader at www.dekalbcountylife.com saying have a good week.